All right, let's see who's popping in. Stella, Elizabeth. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. So, a whole bunch of folks coming in already. All right, very good. We got this puppy rolling. How we doing, Dan?
Outstanding. How about yourself?
Outstanding.
Yes, sir.
All right, so the question of the day, and this is because we have the NFL that's starting today.
Oh no.
What's your favorite sports team? Doesn't have to be NFL, but what's your favorite? Where are you from, and what's your favorite sports team? And if you're from Pittsburgh, you can't stay. There you go. All right. So where are you from? Go Bills. All right. Very good. Good. All right. Where are you from? And what is your favorite sports team? If you don't like sports, that's okay. You can say, I hate sports. My favorite book is. How about that? So I am from Woodstock, Maryland. And of course, the Ravens. Did I just not do that the right spot? I did it to everyone, right? What did I do? Oh, that was to everyone. Hold on. I gotta redo mine because I was sending it to just Dan. Can't do that. All right, Priscilla's got the Cowboys. All right, I think the Cowboys are gonna do good. Boston Patriots, go away. Oh my gosh. Virginia, Elizabeth. From Texas, I don't like sports because I'm boring. All right, I love it. Detra, New Orleans Saints. All right. And Renee, how about them boys? I love it. Renee Hamilton, Delaware, don't like organized sports, especially NFL. I'm sorry, Alvaro. Sorry that you don't like that. I'm not going to call you boring because Elizabeth already took that one. Chiefs from Judy. Northern Indiana, anti-sports. All right, Joseph, you can be anti-sports. We don't judge here, at least not too badly.
That's nice.
Great. Yeah, okay. We got Rachel, Colorado Avalanche, NFL. Love it. All right, well, welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. We like to just break the ice. The question is, where are you from and what's your favorite sports team? If you don't like sports, you can let us know. You can hate on the sports as well. Doesn't matter. We don't care about that, do we, Dan? We just want to make sure we know it. We welcome everybody here today, and we'll go ahead. Let me share this bad boy out so people know they're in the right spot, not some kind of sports program. We had somebody ask that the other day. We got carried away a little bit on a briefing, and they said, "Am I in the right place?" And said, yes, you are in the right place. I think, okay, very good. All right, so we will be talking about automating cyber response and remediation effectiveness and ROI. I know that, Dan. That's what we're going to be talking about.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, we're asking where you're from and who's your favorite sports team. And Detra's from Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Good. Austin, Texas. Loving them Cowboys. Love it. And the Rams from Michael with the Rams and another Bills fan. We got Bills fans all over the place. That's awesome. I like the fact that the Bills are good. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get us cooking. How about that? Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about automating cyber response and remediation and what that effectiveness is in ROI, because I'm telling you what, it's some crazy stuff going on out there, and it must be because we left CMS all the way at the top. That's just because that's where they are today. So there you go. So these are the folks that signed up. I appreciate it. Interagency briefings are always some of my favorites because we get to be able to dialogue and make sure that we're hitting stuff that is really important. Obviously, cyber and phishing attacks and things like that, very important. In fact, here it is, best briefing ever. Debbie from SEC, I really learned how to kill phishing immediately. Love that, don't we, Dan?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a winner. It's right in the warehouse. Cleo, we have a ton of folks from FEMA, by the way. Welcome everybody from FEMA. I don't know how that got disseminated, but somebody said we got to do this. sent a whole bunch of folks here. So Cleo from FEMA allows me to better identify any phishing emails, like that idea, received by the customer support email box. All right. Jerry from NIST, I gained one bit of information from it. Any takeaway, just one bit of information. That's all we need for that. But then we have something a little bit later. From Mark from FAA, it addresses concerns on keeping business systems secure. Love that. That's exactly what we're talking about, right, Dan?
Absolutely.
And Theodore, I learn something new every 10 seconds. That's what, so Jerry from NIST says just one bit of information, and Theodore says, I want something every 10 seconds. I don't know if we can meet that goal, but maybe in the middle of the conversation, we can do that.
Well, happy medium there.
Yeah, there's probably something in there. Little something. So Suzette from FEMA, plain language is used, fact sheet is shared, and links to report POCs one-stop shop. Love that idea. I'm not sure we're going to do that today, but I'll bet you a follow-up conversation could turn that into something exactly what you're looking for, Suzette. What do you think, Dan?
Absolutely.
Bang from FEMA. We have some fun. And whoever Bang is, put that in there. I loved it. We have some fun. I'm not sure about total fun in this, but we'll have a little bit of fun. How about that?
Coming from FEMA, that's even more funny.
That's it. That's awesome. So Sharon from VA, we shut down and share phishing ransomware issues fast. That's one of the issues, right? You got to be able to shut it down and share those ransomware and phishing quickly through the agencies. I love that idea. Please address Cecilia from VA. How can I ensure that I'm not tricked by pseudo sites mimicking UPS, FedEx, PayPal around orders and packages? That's something that happens to everybody every year, doesn't it? All the time now, right? Because some of those phishing attempts they're pretty good. Some of them. Marcus from DHS, how we can get agencies to communicate threats and actual attacks faster? Right on point with what somebody said before. Tim from VA, how automation can stop the spread of malicious code. Fantastic. That's exactly why we're here. And Terry from USDA, reporting protocol of suspected phishing. I don't know if there is a protocol, is there? But we can talk about that.
Absolutely.
We can do that. So session docs, pop them in there for me. Whoever that is, Zachary, Terry, whoever that is, pop that in for us. We have the briefing presentation, B technology capabilities, and QuoLab tech sheet. And if you have been living under a rock and you've never been to a Zoom before, I cannot imagine that's the case. But if it is true, go up top. And you can use that little thing in the middle to make us bigger or smaller, whatever you would like, because you are in control. And if you'd like to participate, we love participation. The docs are going right in the chat. And if you have questions, pop that. You can raise your hand. We can dialogue, right? Or you can pop it in the Q&A. And if there's something that is really, really sensitive and you want to keep that out of everybody seeing it, you just send that to smiller@btechnologyinc.com. or give her a shout, and we'll make sure that you get that answer for you. And you're not going to believe this, Dan, but this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It's provided to the audience for informational purposes only. GSA makes me say this. And all participation in this briefing is voluntary, and engagement by you is not an endorsement or commitment to purchase from any vendor, because that is what gives you the ability to talk with us. And speaking of talking with us, why in the world did you guys decide to join us today? I'm interested in getting my head around kill chain. I'm on the hot seat for cyber protection. I want to know how to solve my cyber issues faster. I have a cyber issue right now, or we got Weisenheimer's already. My boss made me come. So with that, we just want to make sure we're hitting it exactly where you live. All right, while you're filling that out, we're going to go through the agenda here. We're going to introduce you to Dan. Stephanie Miller's here. She's sort of here, I think. We'll give you an overview of Stephanie. We'll let her explain. We'll get you into what's happening with your agencies and how rapid response works, and we're going to give you a tidbit on what's happening with QuoLab, because of what they're doing with cyber response and managing that, and the platform that they have. We'll do a case study, because this is all about automation, doing things faster, right? Right, Dan?
That's absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking about automation versus human analysis and response, because there's a big difference, especially if you can automate things. And there's a lot of automation going on in the federal government as well as industry. So we're glad to be able to hear. So some of the benefits, obviously, is what we're after, and challenges that you want to consider, making sure that you're getting to where you want to go. And we will definitely be asking and answering your questions. We'll ask questions and answer them. How about that? So Dan, tell us a little bit about, ooh, let's get this cooking. There we go. Tell us a little bit about QuoLab, and we'll, Stephanie, if you want to pop in for a second, you can talk about it, or we can just tell everybody how great you are. Either way.
Yeah, so you can tell everyone how great I am. And sorry, everyone, I'm a little bit on the mend. I had surgery recently, but didn't want to miss the call. So I'm going to let Dan and Dave take care of everything. As
I hope you
right?
feel better. Hope you feel better, Steph.
Thanks.
Awesome. So tell us about you, Dan. I know you're located in Maryland, not too far from us.
That's right. I'm just up the road. Actually, you and I are about 15 minutes or so from each other, and I am
right.
north of Washington, D.C., near the Fort Meade General Region, if you know where that is, up the 295 corridor. So, by the way, thank you, Stephanie, for hopping on there and for being here in spirit and also listening in. Stephanie Miller with B Technology and myself at QuoLab Technologies, we're partnered on delivering our solution and our vision for better and more efficient cyber practices to the broader world. We do that together, and we're honored to be here with Dave Lowe hosting this awesome webinar. Always love doing these with you, Dave. So thank you for that. They're always pumped up, full of energy and the good kind of stuff. And
I love it. I love doing it. I get jazzed by how many folks from all the govies that come. I love helping, and it's wild what's happening. It's just wild what's happening with GovBrief. We appreciate you guys being here for sure. So tell us what's happening out here, and just a high level overview, and then we're going to dive into some of their own experiences. So to give us a high level overview of what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely can do that. And right before I do that, Dave, wanted to just quickly highlight that I'm a former Govie myself, having come from the intelligence community sector, doing a bunch of cyber defense work and network operations. But I am a huge believer in, as one of the requests is in the introductory Q&A, was to speak common language, and that's what we're all about at QuoLab. We're about the human element. We're not about the deep technology dive. That's why we work and partner with different tools and technologies that are doing that, those deep verticals. And we're focused at the strategic level. How can we better influence processes and procedures to get to a better, faster cyber outcome? So the topical overview naturally blows into what I was just saying, that we're going to look at a couple different ways that organizations are handling and mitigating cyber incidents right now, to include, both from the small and medium businesses, large scale institutions, enterprises, all the way up to government entities. They all have a lot of commonalities in the way that they're going after things with the TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. But those leave some gaps, and that specifically on the automation and on the speeds front. And that's what we're going to look at, how we can use automation to crush that and get to a much better cyber world in the future. But you can't do that without, obviously the selling point is the benefits, but there are some drawbacks. So we're going to go through those as well. We want to be honest and transparent with you all, that it's not just a bed of roses. There are some thorns here, but as long as you know where the thorns are, you know where to grab on the stem and not poke yourself.
That's true. And while you do stay at a high level in these, ladies and gentlemen, he is a certified propeller head. He can dive down into some stuff like, I'm telling you, and I use that term with as much respect as I can. I've heard some of the details of things that you can't talk about, right? And there's some things that you cannot talk about within the agencies or around other places because of the sensitive information that you've seen. But it is amazing what you think is secure versus what isn't. And wouldn't you say, Dan?
Absolutely would agree with you on that one. That's why this stuff is even more important in today's age, right?
It is really important. So let's ask folks what they have experienced here. Have you experienced a hack, a phish, ransomware, malware, denial of service? Any of those hitting your radar ever? I'm sure there's a couple of these out here, right,
Here they
Dan?
come. Here they are. Wow.
And they're coming. They're coming. If you haven't experienced a phish, I don't know. Maybe
everybody should say yes to that.
Everybody should say
text
yes.
messages, phone, email, whatever, you've gotten that, right?
Like how many did you get today? Now maybe they're thinking that maybe they had like
I'm at 2 so far.
2?
And
I don't pay attention, but I'm sure I'm at least at 2. I get 500 email messages a day at least. And
Oh, that's
99.
on my phone, Dave. I'm not even like text.
Oh,
message.
you're talking about your phone?
My phone.
I guarantee it.
Email. Oh gosh, my spam
It's forever.
are going crazy.
It's forever. So, so while they're doing that, let's talk about what's happening in agencies. Obviously, this is really why we're here. A lot of these things, for obvious reasons, they're answering the questions right now. Hack, phish, ransomware. There isn't any that hasn't happened, right?
That is absolutely correct. I mean, as evidenced in both the poll that we took earlier and what we're seeing right here, right now, live in this poll, it's affecting every single organization and every single player within every single organization. It doesn't matter if you're in the HR process. It doesn't matter if you're, in acquisitions in an organization. You're going to experience some form of cyber impact to your day-to-day operations, right? Whether that's a phishing attack, a direct malware attack, ransomware attack, there is going to be some impact. And the flip side of those impacts is also the training that we have to do, right? That we have to now become more aware and take annual training if you're in the government, or you have to start doing different remediation activities with employees to make sure that they understand. Don't just click on everything. Do a little due diligence and look at things, right? So all of these things impact us on our day-to-day lives, which, I mean, Dave, you yourself, right? Didn't you have an incident where somebody hijacked one of your calls and was doing phishing on you?
It was pretty crazy. This was just last week for the first time ever. We were in a briefing like this, but it was actually an industry briefing, and somebody came in and impersonated somebody who was there and published and put some information into the chat while it was happening. So we're paying attention to that this time.
Exactly.
So anyway, but that happens, right? And
Right.
this is universal. It isn't just in the government, but you see this in business and everywhere else, because these are called picnic errors, by the way. Anybody know what a picnic error is?
We learned
You know what a picnic error is, everybody? This is funny. I'll just say, and I'll leave it to you. But a picnic error is problem in the chair, not in the computer. There you go. All right, with that,
Love
I'm
it.
gonna
The layer 8 issue for the techies on the call. Yeah, the layer 8 being the human layer. The one of the things that we're seeing right across the board in all organizations, both from 20 years ago when I first started getting into cybersecurity up until today, where we're much more involved with cloud operations and a bunch of other, there's hundreds of different systems that we have, probably 5-6 different communication mechanisms that we're using and so forth. All of that means that human-bound processes are incredibly critical to the day-to-day operations of cybersecurity. That means that it's also true for the analysts. So the people doing the defending, like myself in the chair that I used to sit in doing network operations or incident response, you're critically tasked, right, with going through thousands of different records, millions of different artifacts, tracking, managing, and sorting all that data out. And what can happen is that a black hole effect is created based off of the human-bound processes, where I may be a rock star, or let's say I'm a mediocre analyst and I'm diving through, I'm doing things. Well, if I'm not sharing, collaborating, communicating all that data and that information with other members of my team, maybe some better, more experienced SMEs, subject matter experts, right? There's going to be a black hole effect that can bake into that. The same process happens too when you go to operators or cybersecurity professionals from the outside, like from the leadership down, say, hey, give me more information. They're only going to give you information based off the context of what they have of what you're asking for. So they don't understand your business intelligence processes, right? They don't understand what risk metrics you're actually using to measure what information you're asking them for. So you could get a spreadsheet with a bunch of IOCs, indicators of compromise, with malware on them, and be like, thank you, that doesn't really tell me much. But if they said, hey, tell me what systems is it connecting to and why those systems are being targeted and by who, attribution, right? That's where you can start getting that big picture and understand that at the corporate level or the enterprise level and how that's going to impact your business and your organization. But to do those things, one of the things I wanted to highlight here is human-based processes are underpinned with tools and techniques, but all of these are created in different silos. Point 3 right there, where you have the different workflow processes. You have identification, investigation, sanitization, countermeasure deployment, attribution reporting. Each one of those is a skill set. Not every operator is comfortable to operate across all of those, right? Not every single team has the players in that across those categories that can deliver on those. And that's where you need a unified ecosystem that can bring those components to the forefront and bake in those automation sequences to get rid of the manual labor that a lot of operators have to do, and then drive in the value add through the reporting and the dissemination of information.
So
Good
real
question.
quick, Dan. So
Mhm.
when you think about automation, there's a lot of different automation that's happening. We have RPA that's happening in different areas in the government, robotic process automation, and automated tools that are being incorporated in just about every area so that folks can concentrate, I think to your point, on what they do best. And the outliers, right? So what if you can do a significant portion with automation, then the outliers and how you do your responses can come. It's not like the tools all of a sudden just fix everything, right?
No.
Is that it enables human beings to do what only human beings can do. Is that right? Am I barking up the right tree?
No, you're absolutely correct. This is very similar to what happens in the kitchen, right? You give a recipe, a very complicated recipe to 5 different people, you're probably going to have 5 different outcomes and taste from that very complicated recipe. Somebody only sauteed something for 30 seconds when it should have been 60 seconds, right? Little small things like that make a difference. The exact same thing applies in cybersecurity. And to the question that Neri brought up in our chat, that is the cyber black hole that we're talking about. The cyber black hole concept of you have humans that are trying to do the best that they can, but they're also being tasked with understanding things that another human is asking them a question about. Maybe that's partnered strategically, laterally, right? Or from leadership up above saying, hey, explain to us, or what are you doing here? How are you remediating? How are you doing this? And those information communication pathways are what break down the cyber process. The lack of understanding what is truly being asked for. For example, one of the things that we put earlier in the slide deck, and as a leave behind, you can go back through and look at it, strongly recommend everybody here take a look at the Cyber 9 line. That was put in place by the NSA and US Cyber Command to offer a better structured way of reporting. One of the questions in the cursor to this conversation we're having, one of you all put in there and said, how can I better, more effectively engage with reporting protocols? Well, Cyber 9 line is something you should be looking at, how you can better inform up and down the chain and laterally on information to avoid that cyber black hole element from happening. So you ensure that when you come to an operator, when you go to a team, when you go to a tool, you can configure those tools, those teams, those people to give you the information that you need. And unfortunately, unless you're structured to that, and unless you have a baked-in automation framework to empower that, it's a great process to talk about. It's a great thing to come up and say, hey, we need to do this. But unless you have those tools, those metrics, those capabilities that can automate and streamline that process, we're only human, and we're going to fall back on doing the things that we used to do, right?
And
Whatever it is.
And it's also I think what you just said is really important, that clarification and understanding so that you know what is being required, because even in any type of communication, and we all know that we all have communication issues at some point. And if it's not clearly understood of what it is that you're looking for and what the outcome is that you're seeking, sometimes you can be really good at what you do and still miss the mark because of not even knowing exactly what's being required. And then we have the anomalies now of different types of attacks and different ways of folks doing things, right? Because the bad guys are going to continue to come up with different ways of doing things because they're going to keep being bad guys. Is that something that you're seeing too?
Absolutely true. And part of the problem with that is it's not only that the operator may not know or may not want to, they're also overwhelmed. So when you have organizations that are seeing thousands of these phishing attacks, spam attacks, malware attacks, right, ransomware attacks coming through, they have to rack and stack and prioritize. And unfortunately, as we all know, phishing attacks get put to the bottom level, right? So the best way to go about that low common denominator before they become ransomware attacks, right, is automate that processing of those. In our previous webinar that we did, Dave, we covered expedient ways to go about identifying and remediating phishing attacks, right? And I believe that's one of the lead behinds we have for this group too, if they're curious to look at that. And we're also happy to talk about how that can be done in a different scenario, in a different conversation, right? But you have to employ those kind of techniques and tactics, right, on a corporate global scale to be able to better remediate and automate and defend your environment. And it all goes down to data flow. At the end of the day, it's data flow from humans, right? Human to human. So how we communicate and collaborate. And it's also data flow between systems, silos, and tools, and how those tools exchange and flow data back and forth between them.
And unfortunately, the bad guys only have to get through a little once, you know,
That's exactly right.
and the vigilance never has to stop. So you've been talking a lot about automation, and we're going to talk about some specific incidents in a minute, just a side-by-side comparison. So let's talk about this, about what we're seeing about the rapid response and how automation works.
So the automating, right, incident response or a rapid response mentality to cybersecurity threats and incidents is transformational in nature, right? You can't just get there by plugging more tools into the system. You can't, even as much as I like to say, you know, my company, the product that we create is tailored for doing this. As much as I like to say, hey, it's the magic pill, you just plug it in, you're good to go. That's actually not the case, right? It's a transformational business process that has to take place. And as long as you have the buy-off from the correct levels above pushing down, and then down pushing up also from this, so like your subject matter experts, your frontline warriors, as long as they're pushing and saying we need to get better at this, once those two things, you know, meet in the middle and you get that agreement, you're going to start seeing some really important changes from an automation standpoint that will increase your capability to respond. But the important thing is that it involves all aspects of an organization. And governments have, you know, government organizations have the exact same things that, you know, the business corporate world has, where you have your cyber teams, your IT technology guys, right, doing the patch and updates. You have policy, legal, HR. All of these things have to coordinate, work together, and they have to have a unified ecosystem to truly be able to work and remediate things in active process. One good example of that is if you have a ransomware attacking an organization. I guarantee you that a lot of employees, maybe, so you can have spear phishing, or you can have, you know, basic phishing, right, where you're targeting everybody. But if it's a targeted spear phishing attack, where they're going after 20 different employees, maybe across those different verticals that you have on that top line on the screen there. Well, if the cyber folks are aware of it and the business folks are aware of it, and they're remediating, but they're not communicating, collaborating across the enterprise about what's happening live, then maybe the folks in legal or HR who are also getting attacked, they're just going to keep clicking on that email because they're not aware that there's an incident, an event going on that they need to be hyper vigilant about, right? Because attackers are not going to just sit there passively and keep going, you know, oh, okay, you shut us down. Well, shucks, we're done. We're going to go.
They're constantly looking for the weakest link, right?
And then the second point there about the human bound delays, that's unintentional in many, I mean, unless it's malicious, and then which case, you know, you have a whole other HR issue to take care of, right? But if we're talking about non-malicious human bound delays and getting that information across and connecting dots between systems, that is where it's a shift in corporate mindset and methodology combined with providing the right types of tools, maybe reporting mechanisms like the Cyber 9 line, maybe baking in access to information and data across different teams and sectors that maybe weren't traditionally thought of being needed. For example, a lot of organizations have a clear-cut separation between their cyber and their IT teams, right? The guys who roll out and supply laptops to the users and who do patch mandates and updates are different from the guys or gals who are going in and doing the incident response, digital forensics, and all those other activities. It's fine to have those shred outs, but you also need to have communication between the two of them. So the IT team, when when the cyber security side goes to them and says, we need this patched now, they understand that now means now because of these business impacts and not, a week or a month later when we can get to it, because that's happening right now all the time. And I can't tell you how often I saw that even in the government.
All the time.
All the time, right?
Yep.
And so that's what drives that down. That's awareness, proper reporting vehicles, and a capability, a platform or the ecosystem that empowers this automation and this collaboration.
And I think what you just said is really important, because the transformational piece, because these things compound upon each other when there's an attack. And if you watch the anatomy, if you will, of an attack, and they're going for the weakest link, first of all. they're gonna find one at some point, and sometime the weakest link,
it's that picnic level, right?
It is Nate, right?
Yep.
because of either some interest that they piqued to connect with an email that is of interest to me, or, hey, your FedEx delivery is delayed. And so boop, you click, right?
But
So
there's a secondary picnic level in effect too in a lot of organizations, and that is with the cybersecurity incident response team as well, because you're only good as an operator, as a cyber operator, you're only as good as the data that you have access to.
that's
So,
fact.
right? So if you have users who are getting compromised because they're clicking on an email because either they got through the filters or they just aren't following proper logical mindset, right? And looking at a domain to realize, okay, this FedEx domain is got 2 E's in this FedExy or something like that, right? Why am I clicking on this .com? Or something similar to that, right? The same problem occurs with the cyber incident responders. When their organization is getting hit from 50 to 150 different attack venues per day, and they only have access to this specific tool and this maybe small narrow window of threat intelligence data to match up against to see if there's a collision or a correlation, and says this is bad, then they're missing all those other attacks. And that's in fact how a lot of big organizational attacks have happened in the past and continue to happen. And until we get rid of that picnic layer of automating that data flow and giving equal access to that data across the board, we're going to keep having those same incidents and events.
And to your point, it's not that we're bad at what we do. If we don't know what we're looking for, or we don't know what we're seeing when we're looking at it, or we just don't see it because the tool that we have potentially doesn't show it, doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right.
And it isn't a finger pointing thing that we're after here, right? We're after hey, we're all in this together. We all have a role to play, even if we're sitting in the chair. If we're the individuals, I'll include myself in this, and say, hey, if we're not vigilant on what we're looking at and have an understanding of the potential problems that can happen if you click the link, then the picnic error just escalates, right? And we can be the weakest link. And you've had this incident too, where people think, well, I don't know that I should tell anybody that I click that link. What do you do with that?
Right, exactly, because there's that fear of being the one responsible for XYZ problem, right? And that's where organizations need to in my mind, the federal government does a pretty good job about that, of be like, okay, you made a mistake. Let's get you some remedial training if you need it. And if you keep doing it, then maybe we're going to restrict your outbound access from your system to be able to communicate to things before it goes through another security check, right? But smaller organizations aren't really doing that because they don't have the resources in place for that, right? And that's again where it comes down to being able to communicate and raise awareness. I mean, why do we wear seatbelts? Obviously, it's because it's the law. That's the answer I'm supposed to give. But the real reason why my generation started wearing seatbelts back in the 90s, right, was because we started getting educated on what happens when you don't wear your seatbelt, right? And so what do I do when I get in my truck or my car? I immediately lock up. And why? Because it's ingrained in me. Why is it ingrained in me? Because of education, because of having that message continually put in front of my face of, if you don't, you're going to go through that windshield if you get in an accident and you're going to die. And that's what happens, right? So bringing that into the organizational mantra and workflow is great in concept. We like to talk about it, but unless you have an automated way of showcasing how your organization specifically is being impacted by XYZ threats, it makes it very hard for people to relate it to it in a personal way, and then be able to take action on that, right?
Absolutely. So now, this is your system. Now you understand a lot of different systems, and you can speak to other things. You have some questions to put in there. You're not the only system out there. We'll throw that out there, but I'm not going to ask you to explain somebody else's system, but I do want you to explain yours and the concept of what the flow through to say, how do we get to the end goal of, all right, we can automate X amount, and then that way you can see as much as you can possibly see so that you can act appropriately as quickly as possible. That's the objective, right?
That is absolutely the objective. Yeah.
And so let's talk about what you do. And if somebody has some questions, you may have some answers for them. If it's a different system, we'll do what we can. But in your system, let's talk about yours for the moment.
Absolutely. So again, thank you, Dave, by highlighting that we're not the only ones out here doing this. And by the way, this is not a novel concept of what we're going after and addressing. The novel approach that we have taken, though, is making our platform ingests and sources vast quantities of data from disparate data source types. What that means in common languages, we can basically take any kind of data, whether that's cyber, healthcare, law enforcement, HR, legal, and bring it into a system, apply analytics and ways of looking at that data, automation pipelines, right, to automate the flow and the parsing and extraction of information, to include enrichment and pushing that data to other systems, to get to that stage that you were talking about, where you can have automation impacting your organization in a positive way. The way that we specifically go about that is on the left, you have the source data that comes into the platform. Notice that arrow is bidirectional because we don't just pull from silos, we push to silos. Because what good is a system that enriches and provides analytics if you're also not pushing and feeding back to those systems that gave you that data in the first place by making their data repo better, right? So our goal, whether it's your security vendor data, security control stack, right, your SIEM, your EDR, whether it's your historical threat information data repository, we want to keep a pulse on what's happening across all those different verticals, source and ingest that data, apply automation frameworks to that data. In other words, meaning if it's log data, process those logs in an automated way. If it's an incident response event, if it's a piece of malware, we plug in and we say, okay, the user, me as a user, when I put malware into Quillab, or if a system that I have dumps a piece of a malware executable into Quillab, what I used to have to do is go out and run that through static and dynamic analysis to tell me what it does and what the signatures, the thumbprints, right, are that I can use to identify this tool or this malware or whatever it is, right, in the future. Okay, that's a manual process that takes a lot of time from putting it into the system, collecting the information, realizing that piece of malware actually dropped is a loader for the actual piece of malware. Now I need to do the same thing, put it back in that system, get that data back. You guys are getting exhausted hearing me talk about it, right?
Yeah, I know I am.
You do that daily, right? And that's the reality. And so what Quillab does is takes and automates that whole process. It doesn't matter if it's ransom or a malware, executables, right? It doesn't matter if it's enrichment from network topology types of artifacts. Everything that comes into Quillab, if you have an associated resource in the tool, a vendor, partner, feed.
Can you give us example? Give us example of one of those tools. Can you give? So you're not the tool. So I know Splunk, or I know terms. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So for example, if you have a SIEM, your SIEM, or let's even go to one step easier. You have an email that gets sent with an attachment on it that gets sent to an organization. Traditionally, what will happen is that goes into the SOC queue. The SOC analyst on the queue will take that and he'll run VirusTotal and a bunch of other tools, really, really good cybersecurity tools out there, right, and resources against it to see if it's known malicious. But within that PDF, sometimes, let's use a PDF as an example, there's executables baked inside there, could be malware. And so what you do is they take that PDF and then they run it through a scanner, like, it's actually called dynamic analysis. And a VMRay is a good, or Cuckoo are two good examples of commonly used tools in the environment. So that file gets put into Cuckoo. Cuckoo runs it and says, oh yeah, this is a PDF. It's running in a virtual environment, a virtual Windows environment. It says, okay, what happens if a user double clicked on it? Oh, it launched this executable. So it spits out a report that says, hey, that PDF had this executable inside of it. So you take that executable, you put it back into the system and you run it again. And it says, oh, this executable is a loader and it kicked off this piece of ransomware. Take that piece of ransomware, put it back into the system. It runs through that again, and then it kicks you out and says, oh, by the way, this installed ransomware on the system. It started encrypting it, and it started beaconing out to the C2 node, right, for communication. Now you have the entire attack surface, the kill chain from email, including a PDF, all the way through what was happening in your hands. Now what do you do with it, and how do you communicate with that, right? You have a ton of different artifacts of information. Now where do you go with it? Who cares about it? Who needs to know about it, right? The truth and reality is that everybody needs to know about it.
Everybody. Yeah, I was going to say everybody.
HR needs to know that, oh, by the way, that's a Russian or a Chinese or whatever it is threat actor that's trying to attack our organization. So, by the way, here's how we can also train our people to be able to identify and detect this better. So there's another avenue, right? And then so on the IT systems, this is the stuff you guys need to block, and you need to make sure we don't have access to the, this outbound connection that it's trying to do. and then the EDR system and so forth. So that just keeps going and going and going. But the reality is, as an operator, I have this wealth of information. Now, traditionally, it's on me to go put that information back into those repositories, back into those messages, those tickets, those email reports, or whatever it is, right, to get that information out there. Colab took that entire process I was just talking about and we automate it. So we source that piece of malware. It runs that through that loop with Cuckoo or VMRay or whatever other dynamic analyzer you want. It does static code analysis as well to give you the fuzzy hashing and give you all the different functions. And it says, okay, what are the tools, systems, and report formats or vehicles that care about this data? And it just blasts it out to them immediately. So now, as an operator, that's all done for me.
So that you're an operator, but when you start talking about, we have folks here that are across the board. We have management people that are high level, not propeller heads, right? But their job is to manage their crew. And it could be an HR, you mentioned it earlier. You have HR, you have legal, you have different areas of people that need to understand what just happened and the potential damage. And you have the ability to then formulate that from let me make sure this, I'm hearing this right. You package this in a way that can be reported so that the people who are not deep into SOC land, right, not managing the networks, can then take that information and use it within the framework of the language that they can understand. Am I hitting it?
You're absolutely hitting it. For example, GDPR for our European clients or our California-based clients, right? They have data privacy and protection clauses that they have to abide by. If there was a data breach, a data spill, they have a legal obligation to report on that, right? And if the cybersecurity side of the house is not letting the policy and legal side know you guys have a reportable incident here, when that comes out, if it comes out later on down the road in the news, they could be looking at serious fines in a perception from look at Facebook. There's a perception that was given, warranted or not, right? After the attacks that happened in the UK on their data sets, that Facebook was trying to hide and shuffle underneath the surface, protect themselves from people knowing how much of their data got exposed and leaked into the world. Now, whether that's true or not as an organization, they would have been able to expose that as false if they would have had a process in place to say, no, we ran this through our entire regulatory process. Here you go on a silver platter. This is everything that we knew about it. And this is why we're not culpable for that. But instead they got hit with a double-digit million fine for that process.
And we've seen it happen with data breaches across multiple federal agencies, right? And I don't have to call anybody out for it, but we know because we've seen it out there as these are the agencies that got hit. This is what happened as a result of those. Reputational damage alone is really challenging. So as we're looking at this, part of what we're talking about is the difference between doing things just with humans and doing it in conjunction with automated tools. Now, this is real life, right? So you have a couple of things here that are really important to know, to look at the differences side by side, same exact fundamental work.
We're calling this a exercise, but this is actually a real organization on the West Coast that was impacted, and the remediation was done in parallel with their MSSP that they had in place, which happens to be a client of Colab. The MSSP, the Managed Security Service Provider, decided to say our traditional processes, let's match it up with using the automation framework. And again, doesn't have to be Colab. Other automation pipeline frameworks that bake in data sources in this manner in a security orchestration platform concept, saying how much more efficient does this get us and where does it get us as far as a business unit as well. And the results speak for themselves. At the 3 full-time employees, 22 days, right? 1 full-time employee in 5 days. And these are real world numbers, real world example. We're not making this up. We can back it up with our data, right? And this is time and time again, we're seeing the exact same process. And the other thing that's not really on here is the communication part, right? Or it actually kind of is on point 2 under the human bound. Coordination with law enforcement officers, IT, and stakeholders completed in 13 days. That's coordination, but that's not the final, hey, we know this attribute and everything else about them. Within 3 days, we're able to engage and get the FBI on the case and get their help with the Quillab side. And then, of course, we held off until 10 days later on the human bound. They're like, oh, by the way, we now have everything that we need to go to the FBI. We're like, no, guys, that's already taken care of. Here you go. Right. And we gave it back to them. But the point is that because of that automation and that expediting the analytic process and expediting the communication back and forth between organizations, right, to make sure that the IT team working with the internal SOC team, working with the MSSP, having that automation case framework where they can just look and say, okay, these are all the systems that relate to me. Let me go check and make sure and validate that I don't see these signatures, for example, and then come back and update that. That's what we're talking about in enhancing that communication collaboration.
And when you say signatures, you're talking about identifying whatever's happening as a result of that malware.
Right. Whether that's a file, whether that's a email address, selector, whatever it may be. Right. And there's millions of records involved in this one case.
And so when you're talking to folks that are in the federal space, right? Because you do a lot of that. You've been in the world, right? That's where you came from. So when you're talking to folks about at a real high level, take us through the idea of what is the value add to everybody associated within the agency? Well,
the value add is easy to hit when you look at the speed factor on the previous slide we were just talking about. The reduction in costs from a resource standpoint of FTEs alone, let alone reduction in cost standpoint on servers and systems that are consuming electricity and doing all that as you keep spinning them, right? Doing the different things instead of just streamlining that process. But obviously being able to remediate faster and clean systems, get the malware off there, get the ransomware off there, get your data backed up or back to where it needs to be and so forth. But there's also a whole host of other benefits that are here on the screen. And all of those are critically important in today's world as far as bringing and elevating the cybersecurity process to the business intelligence level, right? I think the days of being able to say, hey, we think something bad's over here, call in the cyber sheriff to come in and take care of business, and he walks away and the world's back to, everything's all goosey and awesome. Those days are gone because those attacks and those threats just keep evolving and happening again and again, and they're getting more and more and more complex. So as long as you have an integrated ecosystem within your organization where those different elements, business elements from HR, policy, legal, and so forth, understand the value add that the cybersecurity process is bringing, and the inverse is also true. The cybersecurity process understands the ramification impact to their organization because of this tie-ins, right? In an automated manner, right, in collaboration manner, then you can start truly getting to those like better coordination, better enhanced tracking and metrics, and all those other things that an organization truly needs to get better at what they do.
And I'm just going to point out, you mentioned the cyber sheriff, right? I'm just going to say that the FTE hours, they're not just people sitting around. No. These are people that have mission critical jobs to do in other areas and then just get completely derailed when there's an incident. Right. And that's what we find. And I'll just lay this out just from my history of dealing with data breach remediation years ago and the challenges with that. Nobody thinks they have time to do the planning or the reviews or anything like that. Right. And they don't have the budget. And I've talked to enough people to know this, by the way, Daniel. So when we talk to people, it's like, well, this assessment's going to cost $25,000. We don't have the budget for that. You get a data breach, all of a sudden you have $25 million that you have to deal with. And you have butts on fire around the seats all over the place. So that's where the difference is. I'm not saying that this is a planning structure. I'm saying that these people are not sitting around just waiting for something to happen. And and here's a couple of other things that you wanted to bring out as far as full transparency and all those types of things.
Absolutely. So, that ounce of prevention that you're talking about, Dave, right? That mindset of let's properly prepare. It costs that $25,000 or whatever that case may be for an organization you're just mentioning. And aside from the cost, one of the big costs is for a lot of our clients, the folks that we're engaging with in the more in the corporate world, right? Because they don't have as stringent requirements for having XYZ security controls or processes in place. They're getting that though because of supply chain concerns, right? And that's starting to be driven down both from the government, right? Putting out best practices and policies, and also like supply chain elements, like a customer of ours provides helicopter rotor blades to Sikorsky. Well, Sikorsky is pushing down on them, a small company of 150 people, and saying, you guys better have an established security process and policy in place. Well, they use Collab to look at and identify and their gaps in security ecosystem that they had, and then be able to up their game and get better and more secure. But there's a cost associated with that their CISO and their board wasn't really truly happy with until they understood that this could also mean millions of dollars in lost revenue because they'll lose contracts to these big manufacturers up the chain, right? So the same, I think, exact same thing happens across the board with all organizations. It's painful, but at the end of the day, it's going to make you better. But to get through that pain and have the mindset that this is something we're going to do, you have to ensure that you have the buy-in of your strategic leadership, right? Not only your tactical leaders down at the bottom saying, we're the guys, the organization, the teams doing the work. We also need to have the buy-in of our leadership that says, yes, we're going to back you up and make sure that this becomes a corporate ecosystem, not just a cyber ecosystem type problem that we're trying to deal with. And of course, deployment and upfront costs can be there. They're not significant, to be honest with you. But if you're an organization that has very constrained budget, even 50,000 or 20,000 can be a tight squeeze to fit in for that initial ramp up process. And then that third bullet, that goes back to the cyber black hole effect, right? That not all cyber professionals are happy to have their process and operational efficiency scrutinized.
No way.
Yeah, right.
No way.
They want to have people digging through their underwear, right? And looking at what they got. And the reality is that I've met a lot of resistance actually from subject matter experts in the cyber world, because what they're saying is like, look, man, you're exposing our processes and you're devaluing it because you're making it mass acceptable or mass readable, or you're giving leadership and everybody else the ability to take a deep dive and look at our metrics.
I cannot tell you how
so forth, right?
What you just said, because there's so much about IT, and I'm going to speak for people who are not IT oriented here, and so that everybody can understand. There's a mystery factor of where does the knowledge stop and where does the BS start? Yeah. I'm just laying it out.
And there is, I'm not saying the industry is full of BS.
No,
but it does have a lot of BS. It does, like any industry.
And nobody wants to be scrutinized, just saying. Right. Nobody wants to be scrutinized, but as we work through this, I think one of the things that you said about the pain points make us better. And correct. While it may reveal minor things, these are not major things usually, because you got really, really talented people that are paying attention to what's happening. But if you have these minor adjustments, correct. Just know that those minor adjustments can really make big time improvements in your organizations, big time improvements. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal it.
No, you're 100% correct. And those are like the pain of those has to be understood and acknowledged before embarking on that journey, right? Otherwise, you're fighting an uphill battle against the very team that you're trying to empower.
Exactly.
And you want them to be your allies, not your enemies. And
agreed.
As long as you have good leadership in place and a good strategy, it's very doable. But if there is some hostility to it, that can be explained by this kind of concept. I mean, it's no different in the sales environment where you have CRMs, client relationship management tools, right? That track and manage how effective a given sales representative or account holder is in closing and deals, and how many they're looking at on a weekly, annual, whatever basis when it comes to review season, right? And things like that. This is doing the same thing on the cybersecurity side, where we're able to take that deeper look at and see how effective or efficient certain operators are or are not, right? And ways to improve that process.
And KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. That's
Exactly.
exactly what you're talking about, baby.
That's what we're talking about, Dave.
That's what we're talking about. Key performance indicators. So we are going to get to some questions I'm in just a second. So you can pop those into there. We do have some supplemental resources that are also included in the handouts. And if you have any questions on those, we'll make sure we answer those. So one thing I do want to, but before we get to those questions, we are going to ask if you'd like to continue the conversation, because guess what? We do have a presidential memorandum that we have to meet, number one. And if you have a current issue, absolutely. If you want to talk about automating your kill chain and combining your current tools into a single pane of glass, that's what you were talking about, taking all those different disparate reporting mechanisms, doing that. And when do you want it? When do you want them to talk to you? Because right now, obviously, we're in crunch time for fiscal year end. So if it's a fiscal year end issue, let's make sure we solve that problem. I will throw out that B Technology is a woman-owned hub zone. So if you need something to be done, you don't have to purchase from any vendor, as I said before. But if you want to, you can, because they can sole source if needed and provide you with the justification and approval language if necessary. So there you go. We'll make sure we keep that open. We are going to open it up to questions. And let's see, what do we got? And if everybody's in a coma, we'll know in just a second, Daniel. But
doesn't appear to be.
There's still 60 folks here. So who would like to engage on this? And I will pop this up while you're doing this. So anything that you want private, send it to smiller@btechnologyinc.com or call at 703-887-8345, and we'll make sure we get that. I don't like either answers for the poll questions. I'm not going to submit it. Okay, Lisa, you don't have to. There you go. So you're welcome. If you don't need anything, that's perfectly fine too. But if you do, let's make sure we get that taken care of. And you're welcome, Unita. And any other questions before we pop? I know we had some questions about some specifics. Hopefully you got to it. We had protocol. You mentioned something before about Cyber 9 line. What does that mean again?
The Cyber 9 line is the reporting format it's a very simple list of questions that every cyber report basically should provide the answers to, from who, what, where, when. Sounds very simple in context, in principle, but the reality is it's very easy for those items to get dropped off the list. So if as an organization, you bake that into your reporting requirements up and down the chain, say, hey, you must answer these questions for us. Now you have the information that you need at the business intelligence level, all the way down to the tactical level to address, remediate, and prevent future attacks of the like.
And is that something we can like send that out to them?
The first link actually in the
look at that. That's a preemptive
remarks. Yep, it's the first link is right there, and you can go get a format sample of that and take a look at it. SANS's to put together a really good article on it.
Awesome. We'll make sure that those links go out too, in case they're not clickable links in that. George says, thanks. You're welcome, George. Unita, you're welcome. This is really resourceful, says Nulise. What a cool name. And Shashank says, excellent, thank you. There you go. See, Daniel, somewhere along the line, we got the middle, right? One thing versus one thing every 10 seconds, I think.
Absolutely. We hit that little happy medium.
That's
somehow.
right. Renee says, good presentation, very informative. And Deter, you're welcome. Nulise, you're welcome. And you're welcome, Dan. And appreciate each one of you. I like that, Rebecca. You're welcome. You can come back anytime being all nice like that. Neri, how can we obtain the slide deck for today's presentation? Great question. And that'll pop in there momentarily, I promise. Winfried, you're welcome. And you're welcome, Elizabeth. And Priscilla, you are as well. And here's the information for B Technology. If you want to know, these UEIs are like freaking long nowadays, but it is involved in your presentation if you want to catch up with them. And IAS accredited and G-Cert system service, all of that rolled into the WSB hub zone. So there you go. And you will have, by the end of the day, you will have the briefing presentation, the link to the session docs, as well as the video. So you can watch it over and over and over and over if you want to. And if for anybody that is asking questions, we got 10 folks that want follow-up. You have one-on-one meeting requests. And if you didn't want to fill that out for some reason, would like to talk to somebody anyway, you will have a link as well. And here's the information you can reach out to Daniel and Stephanie, who we appreciate. Stephanie, I know she's under the weather, so we'll make sure we keep that open. And if there's anything else, you got Zach put the session handouts in there as well, so that you can gain access to those. And Daniel, awesome job, man. It was great.
Thanks, brother.
Great interaction. I love and I know sometimes you dive into that and it starts to hurt my head a little bit, but you always
bring it out.
back. Always bring it back to some place that I can understand. And that is really important for folks as well. So we're going to let you guys get out of here. Let me end this poll real quick.
Thank you, Dave.
And just so you know, we got 7 people that need to meet the president's memoranda. Somebody has a current issue and need to automate their kill chain. And 2 folks say this has to be done right away. 3 folks actually said that. So we'll make sure that we get you that, and you get what you guys need, because we want the government to be secure too, don't we?
Absolutely.
That's the idea. I mean, we want you guys to get what you need. And the slides, Neri, they're popped into here. All you have to go to Zach's message at 1:58 p.m. and you can get that right there. There it is again. So you can grab that presentation. Thank you guys very much. Steph, get better. We'll see you next time, guys.
Thank you all.